25 new Paradox Pokemon we could see happen. Since the introduction of Paradox Pokemon in Scarlet and Violet, a lot of people are excited to see if we're actually going to receive more of them in the DLC or in future entries. So today, let's take a look at some of these. One of the first ones we have is Iron Shades. Now, a cool name to start off with, but this is basically what a Krookodile form would look like. And this one is a Dark Steel type, which is a good combination, but the best part is it just looks awesome. Its design kind of emulates that whole like futuristic vibe that you see of pretty much all of the different, I guess, Violet Paradox forms, which are more futuristic in design, implying that they are from the future. The same way the Miraidon looks more futuristic rather than the kind of, I guess, animalistic way that you see on something from the Scarlet version. However, it's a cool design though. Then you also have the future Paradox Gastrodon, Iron Slug, and the past Paradox Gastrodon, Primordial Pool. Now, these two, respectively, have a mixture of either being Water Psychic or being Fire and Ground, which is really awesome, as these two are very much overlooked Pokemon. They never really received any Mega Evolutions in the past, and also giving them two versions, one that's future and past, could be cool as to sort of emulate what we got with Donphan, since it received two different forms with Iron Threads as well as Great Tusk. Either way, speaking of specifically having different kinds of, I guess, future and past versions of the same Pokemon, what about giving ourselves two forms of specifically Meganium? Now, Meganium, of course, the final evolution of Chikorita, was introduced in Johto, and since then, we haven't really seen much happen with it. The closest thing would maybe be New Pokemon Snap, which had a little bit of a kind of hype up of Meganium, but what if we actually gave it two different forms, like these two right here? These are all made by Elite Four, who've made some awesome designs in the past, but here we have two different versions, one that is a future, Paradox form, and the other one is a past Paradox form. Both of these have different typings. The first one, the Iron Plant, is Grass Electric type. The other one, though, Hoover Pollen, is a Grass Bug type, which I think is a cool combination of typings. I don't really know, do we actually have a Grass Bug type Pokemon in the games? If we do, let me know in the comment section which one it is. I can't recall it off the top of my head. And then, of course, the Grass Electric is a cool typing. I think it's nice, and I'd love to see something like this. Also, this design would maybe give a little bit of a boost in hype and just love for Meganium itself. Now, we actually know that legendaries can get forms like these as well, as we saw with, of course, Virizion as well as Suicune. So how about one of the other, like, legendary, I guess, trios that you have, specifically the Regis? What if we actually gave a new form to none else than, of course, Regirock? So this one is the Strolling Stones. This is a rock ghost type. The ghost typing, I guess, comes from the fact that, well, it is a gigantic creature that is just a bunch of, I guess, rocks combined together by different spirits. At least that's kind of the feeling I'm getting from the vibe on this. And overall, I think it's a cool concept. It's just a gigantic bunch of rocks kind of mashed together, being controlled, and then moving around in unison. Whereas, I guess, Regirock, it does feel more like a cohesive singular thing, whereas this just feels like a bunch of rocks smashed together. Now, I know that we did get Farfetch'd introduced in Sword and Shield, but I personally wouldn't mind having a little caveman-looking freaking Farfetch'd. So this is Dubious Club, created by Fakemans, and he made it a flying ground type, which is a cool combination of, well, I guess, typings, because don't really see that much. Either way, though, this thing is great. It's got a giant leak that looks more, again, ancient, right? It's supposed to look like a giant stone club almost, or one of those wooden clubs that you'd see in the stereotypical caveman, I guess, depictions. And in this case, we got exactly that. Kind of what, you would assume a person would think of when they think of a primal version of a Farfetch'd, literally being a little caveman. So if Paradox forms, as we have speculated, are basically just imaginary, then this is probably what somebody would imagine a ancient past version of a Farfetch'd to actually look like. Plus, I really like the big club. What about something like, I guess, Houndoom? So this is really cool. You got Iron Companion and Raging Comet, an ancient and future version of Houndoom. So the future Houndoom, Iron Companion, is a Dark Electric type, and is the loyal Paradox Pokemon. This one sticks to you, and it's regal and does its job. And you can see those electric elements in its design, with its tail literally being I guess, a plug that you would put into a wall to charge it, which is really strange, but overall, it's got more of a regal, cool design. The other one, though, is the ancient Houndoom, which is the Raging Comet. This is a rock fire type, and it's the Scorched Paradox Pokemon, where for specifically the Iron Companion, it talks about the Houndoom's body having evolved to contain robotic features, enhancing many of its abilities. Though these creatures are now much stronger and faster, they retain the loyal nature of their previous counterparts. The high demand for Iron Companion has created a successful market for the breeding and sale of this specific Pokemon. Many business owners and even wealthy individuals own at least one of these highly sought after canines, so basically making them into these rare pieces of of Pokemon you want to have, which is really messed up to say, but I guess that's the way it's being viewed. Almost like having one of those, you know, special dogs or those guard dogs that rich people have. Nonetheless, though, you also have Raging Comet, which is the more, I guess, primal version, right? The scorching heat, fiery version of Houndoom, like an almost original version of Houndoom before what we see in the regular version today. This was what it was when it was fully wild, before it was turned into, well, a domesticated creature. And I think it looks awesome, man. It's just a beautiful design. Then we have the Iron Mine. Now, what is the Iron Mine? Well, it's supposed to be a Turtonator version, and it's a literal landmine. I'm guessing it's a landmine and not like a water mine or something like that, but basically, it's a literal mine. It's called Iron Mine, and it's a fire and steel type, which is pretty evident just based on its design. However, the cool part is the actual entry says this: it resembles a mysterious object mentioned in a paranormal magazine that theorizes it was responsible for the mysterious casualties of some explorers who were never found. Whereas its Violet entry would say the following, which is: the writings in an old journal suggest that the author named the object Iron Mine because of its destructive capabilities, because it literally nukes itself for fun, which is really weird. But yeah, it's a cool design though. I think it's an interesting idea of like doing something a little bit different with the designs. And of course, Turtonator is just a Pokemon that most people don't really think much about. I don't really know many people whose favorite Pokemon is Turtonator, so just give it a little bit of love and make it a little bit more exciting for people to actually use it. Next up though is my personal favorite design on this whole video. It's going to be a Paradox Sharpedo that is based on the Helisoprion, which is actually called the Iron Saw. Now, what is this? Well, it's basically a real life, this is a legitimate, real life, actually existing shark, which looks like this. So I just love that basically what we have right here is a future version of that of Sharpedo, where it literally becomes that. It's that kind of shark is what it turns into, which I think is great. But, you know, most people might be thinking, oh, but why wouldn't it be a past version? Which, I don't know, man. I think it's cool that it's a future Paradox form that would be in something like Pokemon Violet, rather than just a, you know, kind of primal version, you know, which kind of would be the easy way out. This makes it way more unique, and I just love the way this thing looks. Now imagine if a Pokemon could wear its enemy as armor. Well, that's basically what this is right here. This is Iron Claw, which is, yeah, it's basically, it's a Zangoose that's taken its enemy, which of course is Seviper, and turned it into armor. That's literally what this is, which is crazy. So this would be a normal poison type, which is, ooh, an interesting combo. But basically, this is just nuts, man. So this design was actually made for by Beta Art for the Drake. And shout out to Drake, by the way, longtime friend of mine, worked with him many times. And this is such a cool idea, man. Literally having Zangoose wearing its enemy as armor. What? That is just nuts, man. It's crazy to imagine that this would be an actual thing. I mean, I think it would just be even a little bit too grotesque for Pokemon to do, but I think it would be cool though. What about Jirachi? Now, this design was made by Subarashi, and it's named Iron Wish, and it's a Psychic Fairy type, which is a great combination. However, I'm kind of curious, would this really, like, you know, work? Because the thing with Jirachi is that it grants wishes. So if we had a person who literally imagined the existence of this thing and it came into reality, then does that mean that Jirachi can also grant wishes just like regular Jirachi? Because that's exactly what it normally does. According to the entry here, Jirachi from a parallel future that can absorb the light from the moon, and it can also create any wish without any consequences by using the power of the triangulum in the night sky. So yes, this would be a wish granting, I guess, future version of a Jirachi, which is pretty cool. So now that we're talking about these more legendaries and mythicals and all that kind of stuff, what about, well, I guess giving ourselves a Iron Rainbow, aka giving Ho-Oh some love. This will be a Fire Fairy type. This is also designed by Subarashi, and it talks about the future Paradox Ho-Oh is one of a kind. It radiates heat to take off into the sky and even deep space. Even though this sounds impossible, it absorbs visual color to increase its power, which I guess makes sense because the whole thing is it's the rainbow Pokemon, right? It is able to manifest all the different colors, or it has all the colors on its actual body, so it makes sense that it'll be able to actually increase its power by absorbing actual light, which I think is pretty cool, though normally that would cause something different to happen. But nonetheless, I think it's pretty awesome, and I think the design looks sick as well. And speaking of specifically talking about, I guess, Generation 2 legendaries, what about this one? So yes, I am a total simp specifically for Lugia, okay? I'm a massive simp. It's my favorite Pokemon of all time. But what if we gave Lugia a Paradox form that was, again, more ancient, right? More primal in its design. And this right here speaks to me 100%. This was made by Supernoga, who specifically made it look primal and just oh so freaking cool. Its actual teeth here, or its fangs, look more similar to something, I guess, like almost Raikou, so giving it a little bit of a saber-tooth tiger type of design, which I think is just awesome, man. I personally am the biggest fan of this. I think it's awesome, and I have no complaints. But that's not the only one, though. Another design here is specifically this one of Azumarill. So this would be an Azumarill that would be a futuristic form. It looks more robotic in its design again, so it just kind of gives off again that vibe that it fits perfectly into Violet. And I do wonder if we do get more Paradox forms, if they all will keep having this whole like robotic design to them, because that seems to be the case, at least for the Violet ones. And then of course the Scarlet ones do have that more primal design. And I do feel like at least with the primal design, you have a little bit more variety with what you can do and how you can design it. Whereas with the futuristic ones, they do look cool. However, they're all most likely just robots, which is a little unfortunate, as it would be cool if they could just kind of vary it up a little bit. Speaking of varying it up, how about the Abyssal Bouquet? This is specifically a cool design for a Paradox Cradily, and this peculiar life form was found in the darkest depths of Area Zero. Although largely sessile, it possesses great psychic abilities to lure their prey in. If all else fails, this creature will resort to their muscular necks and powerful tentacles to consume their prey. And this is based on an ancient giant crinoid, which is, I'm not exactly sure what it is. One of these things, I'll show it on the screen right here. That's what it's based on, and it's a psychic grass type, which is pretty awesome. The design looks pretty cool as well, giving the Pokemon, I guess, multiple heads than its usual singular head is also pretty cool. Or rather, making its tail look like a head, I think is pretty freaking cool. Now, how about we instead make Cynthia very happy by actually giving her another form, a Neo Garchomp, which would be specifically looking like this. As for its design, there's actually even a whole video by the artist Bob Blazik, who specifically made a design of what this was based on, which is a prehistoric looking, flying dino. So it's pretty awesome. I think the design also matches up well with the actual dino in this case, and I just think it's awesome, man. I think it's cool taking that whole jet plane motif in mind and then just kind of working around that to make a really sick design. And personally, I'm a big fan of this. Being a dragon flying type is pretty interesting, and I think it could make for a pretty cool Pokemon, especially if it was a kind of past form. Now, how about Mewtwo? Now, Mewtwo is a cool Pokemon, but what if we actually got a kind of a mixture of armored Mewtwo, the idea of Mew 3 and all that sort of stuff, and you just kind of put it into a singular thing for Iron Blast? This thing would be a Psychic Dark type, and it would be pretty awesome. Again, it is more of a futuristic design, as you may notice, which is totally fine. There's nothing wrong with that. It is more futuristic looking. However, I guess the cool part is this could be considered the Mew 3, right? The third version of Mew that we've been kind of waiting for a long time. We only really have Mew and then Mew 2, and that's about the extent of it. We never really see Mew 3 officially, properly get an actual form. I guess if you want to count the Megas, that's one thing, or Armored Mewtwo, maybe, but I think it would be cool to see like a final third version. So, what about this? Iron Arms. This is a fighting steel type. This is, of course, your boy Machamp, looking pretty championship-like. I mean, this dude is massive. So, his ability will be Cork Drive. His basically whole design is like this. Iron Arms has an incredible database. It contains each of the martial arts created by humanity. This makes it a lethal weapon in hand-to-hand combat. Its 6 floating arms are connected thanks to the magnetic waves that is released from its belt. These can be separated from it at a range of about 100 meters. Each punch has an impact power similar to that of a speeding bullet train. I've been in a bullet train recently in Japan, and I can tell you, they go very fast and they hit hard. So, definitely a cool design. I also like the typing with being it fight and steel type, because yeah, it's a nice combo. Overall, awesome looking. Grimwalker comes in and he walks on the steps. This is Grimwalker. This is a Paradox Pokemon of Grimmsnarl, and this is a dark poison type. An ancient relative of Grimmsnarl, the hairs on it contain a lethal toxin which it can pressurize to bulk up and strengthen itself, exerting a grip of over 1,000 psi. Said hairs are also scattered in its hunting grounds, lethally poisoning anyone who simply brushes against one. And you can even see one of its arms turns into what looks almost like a Charizard head, which is pretty crazy. And overall, this is a cool design. It just kind of makes Grimmsnarl kind of more tall and regal, but also adds in some cool like backstory to it, as well as giving it an arm that looks like a Charizard, which is in itself pretty badass. Next up, though, is another designed by Bob Blazik, and this one specifically is a Neo Aipom. This is a Psychic Ghost type, which is, again, cool combination of like actual typings, though the design doesn't really say that when you look at it. You would just think this would be an electric type Pokemon, just kind of based off of the way it sort of looks and the fact that it looks a bit more metallic in design. But this thing is different. So what is this? Well, basically, here's the little like ID for it. It starts to adapt to zero gravity environment and becomes elusive, while also gaining more psychic power as their brains develop at a breakneck speed. So this could be a futuristic, a paradox form of a future version of Aipom, which I think would be pretty awesome.